Okay, we're going to first talk about multiplying decimals. Alright, when you're multiplying decimals, it's not really important to line up the decimal as much as it is to line up the numbers. So I'm going to start with the 4, and I'm going to multiply 4 times 5. So 4 times 5, that gives me 20. I write the 0 down and I carry up the 2. And then the next step would be to do 4 times 1. That gives me 4, plus the 2 I had left over gives me 6. Then I'm going to look at the second number. In this case, the second number is 0. And when I have 0 times anything, I get 0. So 0 times 5 is 0, 0 times 1 is 0. I don't need to write anything down in this step where I normally would. The next is the important step of counting how many decimal places I need to move over in my answer. So if I start with the 1.5 and I start to the far right, I'm going to count 1 decimal place over, and then in the 0.4 I count 1 decimal place over. 1 plus 1 gives me 2, so in my answer I should be over 2 place values from the right. So 1, 2, my decimal point would go right where it is. So it would be 0.6, and I don't really need the 0 anymore. So I have 6/10 as my answer. So on the last slide, if you remember, I told you it wasn't so important to line up the decimals. It was more important to line up numbers from right to left. So if I write 2.25 and I'm multiplying that by 2.3, I'm not going to line up the decimal points, I'm going to line up numbers. So that's what it's going to look like. So the first step is to do the multiplication of 3 times each number. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so when I multiplied 3 times 2.25, I got 675. Now it's time to do the 2 in 2.3. So I'm going to put a place value hold over 0 because I'm using the second digit in. 2 times 5 gives me 10. So I'm going to carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and 2 times 2, the last one is 4. The last step is to add up your answer. I'm going to have to add it to the right. So I get 5, 7, and then 6 plus 5 gives me 11. I would have carried a 1, and 4 plus 1 is 5. Now we have to figure out how many decimal places I need to move over. So let's take a look at this. In the first number, I'm over 2 decimal place values, and in the second number, I'm over 1. So 2 plus 1 is 3 full decimal places. So from the far right of my number, I'm going to count over 3. 1, 2, 3. It's going to go between the 5 and the 1. So you get 5 and 175 thousandths as your answer. So say you get a word problem, and it says 70% of 150. Well, the word of means that I'm going to do some multiplication, and I'm going to multiply 150 by 70%. But what does 70% really mean? That means I have 70 out of 100. So that means I have 70 hundredths. So I'm going to multiply by 0.70 times 150. Go ahead and set it up, and then check on the next slide to see if you got it correct. So notice I wrote 150 first. I'm going to multiply 150 times 0.70. But when I look at this, do I really need this 0? I don't. So I'm actually going to take 150 and I'm going to multiply it by 0.7. So 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 5 gives me 35. I carry the 3. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 plus 3 is 10. Next, we find out where the decimal places go. So in 150, there's no decimal point. Well, it's here, but there's no number to count in from. So here we're counting in 1 decimal place. So in the answer, we're going to count in 1 decimal place, and our answer is going to be 105. That's it for today. I hope you learned how to do multiplication with decimals.